Iowa, with a bachelor's in psychology in 2003, and then he completed his PhD in behavioral and cognitive neuroscience in 2011, and also from the University of Iowa. His postdoctoral research is at Michigan State, where he examined the brain mechanisms involved in sleep and circadian rhythms in diurnal species. In a diurnal species, that's the Nile grass rat, which he can tell you a lot about. His current research interests include sleep, circadian rhythms, diurnality, nocturnality, and the environmental and experiential factors that shape sleep-wake patterns in humans and in animals. And I can confirm that Dr. Gall also personally knows about environmental and experiential factors related to sleep. He and his wife Heather have 3 children, including a 1-year-old. And if you've been around him this year, you know that this 1-year-old, like all newborns, has been learning about sleep for the first time. So, will you please join me in giving a warm welcome to Dr. Andy Gall.
Good morning. Thanks for being here. I'm so excited to be here this morning talking about my faith and scholarship and how those two things work together in my life. I want to first thank Andy McCoy and Jonathan Haygood for putting together an amazing workshop last summer that's lasted throughout the year. I really learned a lot about myself and thinking about how faith coincides with my science, and it's just been a really excellent experience for me. I wanted to start by reading my short 250-word biography, which was sort of a charge or a challenge given to us last summer so that we could discuss our vocational biography and to discuss really what is the path that has led me to Hope College. So here's my short story. I've been called to serve others by becoming a teacher scholar at a Christian liberal arts college. A defining moment in discovering my calling was when my father asked me as a 7-year-old boy, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" At that time, becoming a medical doctor seemed like a good option, one where I could serve others, become intellectually engaged, and have a successful career. The path to fulfill that dream was shaped by important figures in my life, my parents, teachers, pastors, friends, and God. Those that I now understand were placed at important junctions in my life to help me discern my calling. College was a time of deep learning and reflection. It was at the University of Iowa that I learned that I loved science, research, and the brain. I was excited to do research, to answer important questions about how the brain worked, but most importantly, I discovered my love and passion for teaching. It made me happy, and I felt that I was following an important call at that time in my life. It turns out it was one of the most important calls in my life, and I'm so happy that I followed it. Teaching allowed me to interact with students, to serve others, to educate others, and to spread my passion for psychology and neuroscience. It was in the classroom when I could be passionate and receive positive feedback from students, most times. I could go back to the lab after teaching with a newfound energy and excitement to examine the development of sleep and circadian rhythms in infant rats. What could be more exciting than that? My vocation really has become educating others, mentoring students, and being joyful and thankful for the opportunities to live a life of leadership and service. God has called me to be at Hope College to enthusiastically educate students about neuroscience, to foster relationships with students, and to cultivate meaning from those experiences in my life. The ever-changing path that I was called to take has taken time and experiences to come to light, but having faith and trust in God's call has led me to a place that I love to be. And that sort of sums up who I am, so we could just end the talk right here. But I want to at least take some time to think about some specifics of my research and how they interact with my faith. And I see my life at Hope College as being one that is incredibly fulfilling, one where I get to interact with colleagues and friends and with students every day and form meaningful relationships that are really important to me. And if I think about my path here to Hope College, it has been a bit of a winding road, one in which is filled with experiences, important experiences, valuable experiences. So if you remember nothing more from today's talk, remember a couple of things. First, always be listening for God's call. It might just change your life. And secondly, in order to flourish, make sure that you actually follow God's call. And third, I would say get plenty of sleep, which I think is also meaningful. My interest in research really began as a young child, as I got interested in science and bugs and discovering things very early in my life. And if I think about myself as a child, I think of myself as someone who was inquisitive, perhaps a bit skeptical, but definitely excited to learn new things. And anyone who knows me probably can testify that I'm very enthusiastic about teaching, about neuroscience, and about really about educating students. My parents taught me at a young age that experiences are the most important thing in life, that material things are not as important. Spending time with your family, going on vacations, those are the things that you remember. Those are the things that carry you through life. And sometimes it takes reflecting back upon those moments to realize how important they were, and at other times, you realize what's right in front of you. As I think about my path a little bit, I really wanted to get into medicine, at least so I thought. And so I did a lot of experiences, internships, shadowing, volunteer work in hospitals and in pediatrics and oncology and all kinds of places, and I didn't love it, if I'm honest with myself. I didn't love it. It included things like drawing blood and doing phlebotomy and things that I absolutely did not ever want to do again. And so it's meaningful, though, to me because the things that I discovered were not good fits for my life told me something about the path that I needed to follow. So I decided to pray about my pursuit of a career in medicine, and I started to really listen and engage with God's call, and I really listened. God asked me what I enjoyed, what I was most passionate about, what drives me to wake up each day and get excited about life, and the answer there, I found, was teaching. So I did some volunteer work, as I mentioned, in a children's hospital, and I started to tutor children that were in the hospital long term on helping them with their homework since they were in the hospital for a long period of time, and I found that was my passion. It was right in front of me, but I just at the time really wasn't listening, and once I did take the time to listen, everything fell into place. You might be wondering at this point, okay, what does sleep have to do with all of this, considering the title of my talk is Why You Should Sleep. Sleep, to me, however you define it, is something that's mysterious. It's complex. It's interesting. It's something that we can study that we know some things about, but there are so many things that we don't know about it. It's truly a wondrous thing. So where do I begin? How can I consider getting involved in doing some sort of research and doing with sleep? And when I think about my experiences in the children's hospital, I learned that through teaching them, I noticed that those that were most ready to learn, most eager and engaged, and even those that seemed to heal the best were those that told me that they got a good night's rest. And I know that that seems a little trite, and maybe it seems very obvious, right, given all the background and knowledge we know about sleep. But at that time in my life, it was something that an observation that I made that was interesting. So how did I get involved in understanding the development of sleep and wakefulness in infant rats? Like I said, how many people get to say that they studied something so exciting? I truly was excited to learn about science, to figure out some of these answers to these questions. What's the function of sleep? And you may be wondering, why did we look at infant rats? And I'll try to give you an answer to that here. Let's start with thinking about, switch this over real quick. Let's start thinking a bit about what sleep actually is, okay? Sleep is, again, a mysterious, complex, difficult to define kind of thing. And if I were to ask you right now, just in one sentence for me, define sleep. You all know what it is, right? You all do it every night, but what is it that encapsulates it? Can we encapsulate it in one sentence? So I looked to the Merriam-Webster dictionary to try to answer this question. And they define sleep as the natural periodic suspension of consciousness during which the powers of the body are restored. Wow. Wow. How do we unpack that, right? It would take me hours to unpack just what consciousness is, and then how is it naturally, periodically suspended, and how do the powers of our body become restored? Are they restored by God, perhaps? How does this work? So if we look a little further down the page, Merriam-Webster dictionary gives some sub-definitions, so maybe that'll be helpful. Let's take a look. A state of torpid inactivity. What? We know that the brain is incredibly active when we sleep. This is a bit inaccurate. Perhaps they're sort of referring to the inactive part of your body, true, but there's so many things that are active when you're sleeping. Let's try B, death. Oh, no. Sleep is not death, but we do sometimes say that we put cats to sleep, which means death. And then it says also trance, coma. These are distinct things neurologically, completely distinct things from sleep. So obviously Merriam or Webster had a wrong viewpoint here about what they thought sleep was. Let's try to see the closing of leaves or petals, especially at night. Now we're into flowers, okay? A state marked by a diminution of feeling followed by tingling. My foot's gone to sleep. Now we're just going down a weird path. All the way down to hibernation. Hibernation is not sleep, by the way. It's also something completely distinct. So we're in trouble, right? Merriam or Webster can't even define sleep. And if we look to the medical dictionary, we get a little bit of a better definition. You see some parallels here. A natural periodic state of rest for the mind and body in which the eyes usually close and consciousness is completely or partially lost, so that there's a decrease in bodily movement and responsiveness to external stimuli. A little bit better, but we're sort of missing a key element here, which is, why do we sleep? What's the function of it? It's kind of hard to figure out based upon these definitions. So as I started my career in graduate school, we wanted to look at sleep in infants, in children, to see really what's happening when they're sleeping, because it turns out that infants sleep more than you ever will for the rest of your life, and that includes animals as well. Infant sleep, there's something special about it. And these are actually pictures of my 3 children. Can't tell any similarities, right? The one in the middle is Oliver, who's now 14 months old, and then Adeline, who's now 10, and Stella, who's now 7. I have plenty of pictures to choose from. Sleep researchers get a little bit infatuated with taking pictures of their kids while they sleep, so I have lots of these pictures. But I use this just to say that, you know, if we look at children or infants that sleep, to me there's really nothing more beautiful or serene than watching a baby sleep. And I'm sure you've all heard the expression, sleep like a baby. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could all just sleep like a baby each night, falling into a deep slumber, dreaming of milk and sugar plums quietly and efficiently, creating new synapses, ones that will shape the way we think and experience life. Wouldn't it be amazing if we could all sleep like a baby again? But for some of you who are new parents, I know a couple of you are, maybe not so much, right? When babies are born, they sleep. Yeah, they sleep 16 hours out of 24 hours a night, but it's not all coming at once, unfortunately. They're coming in 1 or 2 hour bursts, and then they're awake for a couple hours, and that's happening at night as well, unfortunately. And so what ends up happening is they're sleeping a lot, but the sleep-wake patterns are disorganized. It takes time for that to organize. The neural circuitry takes time to organize, and that's really how we start to organize our behavior so that we're awake during the day and asleep at night. By the way, if you look at college students, somewhere in this range, you should be getting 8 to 10 hours of sleep per night. Right? And I'm not going to poll you and find out how much you sleep, but I'm guessing that you don't sleep that much, and I'm hoping by the end of this talk you'll consider sleeping more. Here's what I mean by sleep patterns changing dramatically with age. So what we see here on the y-axis is age from 0, day of birth, up to about 120 days of age, about 4 months. And you can see these darker patterns are sleep patterns, and the white parts are when they're awake. And you can see very early on for that first month, they're arrhythmic pretty much, meaning they're sleeping, they're waking, they're sleeping, they're waking. There's no really good pattern to it, right? And as we get to about month 2 or 3, we start to see a beautifully organized pattern where sleep is actually occurring at night when it should be, and wakefulness is happening during the day with naps interspersed throughout. And another thing that you might notice is that wake bouts are more consolidated, fortunately, or sorry, sleep bouts are more consolidated. Wake bouts are though as well. In other words, finally, after 2, 3, 4 months, parents are finally allowed to get the sleep that they need because the child is finally sleeping much longer periods of time at the appropriate period of time. And both of those things take time and connections, neural connections, in order to occur. So what we're talking about here is circadian rhythms. This is what I've really studied for the past 15 years now. Our rhythms come in all forms. Right? It comes in forms of physiology, like blood pressure is very rhythmic, our body temperature is rhythmic, Behaviors are rhythmic. Sleep and wakefulness is rhythmic. We do it around the same time each day, hopefully, or night, hopefully. Cognition is even rhythmic. We have rhythms so that our life is predictable, so that we have a sense of kind of being prepared for what's coming next in our life. And so rhythms are really important. One key brain area, one beautiful, majestic, beautiful, amazing brain area. My favorite brain area is this little one right here that's pink. It's tiny. It's called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or SCN for short. And the SCN is the master clock. In other words, without the SCN, our sleep-wake patterns would look like this. We would be arrhythmic. We would be sleeping and waking and sleeping and waking, and we would have no organization in our life. So the SCN plays a really important role. It's right above the optic chiasm. This is the bottom of the brain, right above the optic chiasm. And it's really in a perfect spot in order to receive direct retinal input, because it's right above the nerves that send visual input into the brain. The SCN is rhythmic. In other words, it's really, really beautiful. This is bioluminescence. What we're looking at here is the SCN that's active during the day and it's inactive at night. It's telling you when you should be going to sleep. If you would only listen to it. You have to listen. You have to listen in order for you to actually fall asleep. You have to listen to the cues that you receive, and you have to take the time to rest and listen to God. All of these things are key components that I want you to remember. I mentioned that infant sleep patterns are fragmented and become consolidated. This just means that over time, the sleep and wake bouts become elongated or longer so that parents can actually get the rest that they need at night. And it's dependent upon the SCN. If we look at videos, I'm still continuing with videos of my kids, videos of infants that sleep, notice this is happening during the day when it's light outside, right? Because her SCN is not completely developed yet. It hasn't set the connections to the other brain areas to allow for the expression of rhythms yet. Infant rats do a similar thing. If we look at an infant rat sleeping on its back in a thermoneutral environment, we can see twitching. This rat is sleeping. It's in rapid eye movement sleep. But the cool thing is they only sleep for about 45 to 60 seconds, followed by about a 15-second wake bout, which occurs right here. And then they fall right back into sleep. So their sleep-wake patterns are happening about once per minute. So this is showing some data that I collected as a graduate student showing nuchal EMG. This is muscle activity in the nuchal muscle of the neck. And where you see those higher amplitude periods, those are indicative of wakefulness when muscle tone is high, followed by periods of sleep. Notice the time scale here is 15 seconds. So infant rats are cycling between a complete period of sleep and wakefulness in about 1 minute. And the next minute they are asleep and wake up again, right? Good thing infant humans aren't quite as fragmented as infant rats are, right? But infant rats also develop much faster in some ways. Their sleep-wake rhythms develop much faster in that by the end of the 3rd week, by postnatal day 21, we see an incredible elongation of wake bouts and also of sleep bouts. If you look at the time scales here, they're quite different. So we see elongations of sleep and wake bouts, and at the same time, we also see evidence that circadian rhythms are being expressed by this time point. So although they're sleeping in these shorter bouts, infant rats consolidate their sleep and wake bouts much faster than humans, and they also develop circadian rhythms much faster. So here's some more data showing that sleep bout durations over time, this is postnatal day 2 through postnatal day 21, sleep bout durations elongate as development continues, and wake bouts elongate over development in the infant rat. And you'll notice here that wakefulness is higher at night than during the day by P15 or P21, suggesting the development of nocturnality, which is expression of circadian rhythm. So these things are developing quite rapidly in the infant rat, which gives us a really nice model to examine them. We know actually from work that I've done that the SCN is also important in infant rats, because if we lesion it, if we destroy cells within the SCN, what we see is that their sleep-wake patterns revert to a more infant-like state, suggesting that the SCN plays a really key role in the expression of our rhythms. So you might be wondering, okay, so infant rats need the SCN to sleep. What about humans, right? And so this is a bit of an interesting transition, but we're still talking about children's sleep or young ones' sleep. right? Fortunately, we didn't do any experiments where we lesion the SCN, and preschoolers, don't worry about that, that's not what we did. But instead, what we wanted to look at was really, what does sleep in preschoolers look like? And are there ways that we can consider helping preschoolers get more sleep before it's too late? We know some trends, which is that about 77% of preschoolers experience sleep-related disruptive behaviors at least a few times per week. That's a scary statistic. Preschoolers need 11 to 12 hours of sleep daily. Most likely aren't getting it. There's evidence that they're not getting that much sleep. And there's a gap between how much parents think that their children are getting and how much their child is actually getting, which is also a bit scary. Some of the data that Dr. Sonia Trent-Brown and I collected as a pilot study here shows that the total amount of sleep that preschoolers got in our pilot study was right around 9.5 hours, according to a Fitbit that we placed on them. Parents estimated their child's sleep at closer to 10 hours. So there's a significant difference in terms of what parents thought their child got and what they actually got, and that's far less than the 11 to 12 hours that they need, unfortunately. Some of the things that we're looking at is whether or not night light use might be correlated with this drop in the amount of sleep that they get. But it's an epidemic in some ways, and even preschoolers aren't getting the sleep that they need. If we look at sleep-wake patterns here, this is showing sleep onset and wake onset. This is one preschooler that had beautifully organized sleep and wake patterns. They went to sleep almost at the same time every night. They woke up at almost the same time every day, got about 11 hours of sleep. This is ideal, right? But we're moving over here to something a little bit more realistic, and than the extreme case of some preschoolers who are not going to bed at the same time every night, not even close, and waking up at erratic times in the morning. I would argue that in many ways, parents have a very high responsibility, right, to make sure that their kids are getting the sleep that they need so that they're ready to learn and ready to be engaged. Okay. This kind of brings to light an important thing, which is that I mentioned that light may be playing a role. And so you might be thinking, okay, so this is what we're aiming for. I don't know about you, but it's difficult, right, to go to sleep at exactly the same time every night and get up at exactly the same time every morning and get the full 8 to 9 hours of sleep that you need. But that's what you need to aim for, because the research shows that a routine sleep time is the best way to have a routine wake time so that you get the rest that you need. And it's thought that, again, light may be playing a role in this. So if you're saying to yourself, yeah, but I can't, right? I've got a neuroscience exam I have to study for. I have a chemistry exam in 2 days. I have a paper I have to write. You have to sort of reorganize your life so that you do the work during the day when the light is out, and when it gets dark, it's time for sleep, okay? And I know that's easier said than done. But one interesting study that was done by Ken Wright et al. Actually was a camping study, and they took participants out to the middle of the wilderness and had them camp in the middle of the mountains where there was no artificial light. And even the participants that said, I'm a night owl, you'll never change my sleep-wake patterns, they did. They actually did, because they got the important light that they needed during the day, and they went to bed at night when they were supposed to. They shifted their sleep-wake patterns just by taking them out of the artificial light. So I would argue that artificial light is something that our ancestors didn't have, and we've sort of adapted to use artificial light to push beyond the limits of what we need to be doing in terms of our sleep. So you need to listen. You need to listen to your SCN. The Nile grass rat, as Andy mentioned, is something that I brought to Hope College, which is a diurnal rodent species. These are animals that are awake during the day, which is different than most rodents, which are nocturnal. And one thing that we wanted to ask relating to light is, what happens if we put these organisms in a variety of different temperature conditions and in dim lighting conditions? One of my research students, Garrett Fogo, has been doing a lot of this work, and it's under review currently. And what we found, interestingly enough, is that when we placed the animals in dim light, their sleep-wake patterns were completely disorganized and actually flipped. You can see how much of the wake patterns here actually start to occur into the nighttime period in dim lighting conditions. So you can see that dim lighting conditions significantly affects their behavior in really meaningful ways. So one way, in order to get better sleep, is to get more real light from your environment during the day and try to put away the phones and the artificial light at night. If I think about how this relates to faith and scholarship and what does the Bible have to say about sleep and rest? There's some passages that struck me. One is here. It is in vain that you rise up early and go late to rest, eating the bread of anxious toil, for he gives to us his beloved sleep. I think what I want you to think about here is that sleep is a gift. Sleep is a gift that really God is giving to his people. And so when we rest, we trust in the goodness of God and we sort of lift up our anxieties to him. I would argue that really sleep eases the anxieties of the day. And by avoiding sleep, sinful anxiety can ruminate. And so we need to trust God to put our minds and bodies at rest. And it's an important lesson to learn. We should embrace sleep. It truly is God's good gift. In peace I will both lie down and sleep, for you alone, O Lord, make me dwell in safety. I lay down and slept. I woke again, for the Lord sustained me. You can find these words that will hopefully inspire you to rest, to confide in him, to sleep, to pray. The Lord God has given me the tongue of those who are taught, that I may know how to sustain with a word him who is weary. Morning by morning he awakens my ear to hear as those who are taught. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. And that depends upon our ability to listen, to rest, to confide in him. I recently had a student bolt into my office, a student that I actually did not know. It was on a Friday afternoon, a late Friday afternoon, and he bolted into my office and said, Dr. Gall, I need to talk to you about something. I said, okay. He said, several faculty members have sent me your way. I need to figure out how I can synthesize sleep. How can I sleep for 1 hour at night and get all the sleep I need in that 1 hour and work for the other 23 hours a day? We could all be so much more productive. The answer I gave him just wasn't the answer he was looking for, and we had quite a long discussion that afternoon. But what I want to emphasize is that we should really trust in the sleep process. We should get as much sleep as our bodies need. It's an important thing. It's not something to push aside. It's not as if sleep is interfering with our life. Sleep is the opposite of that. It increases our productivity. So we should try our best to follow that. I want to talk a little bit about how I see faith and neuroscience connecting. And as I think about the role that faith plays in my own teaching and my own research and learning, I often think about those with disabilities and how it impacts their life. And for those students who are here today who have taken my Introduction to Neuroscience class, I think you could testify that the individuals that I've brought in with neurological disorders are the very, just incredibly memorable stories and impactful stories. And individuals with disabilities have revealed to me that God has created a life that individuals can live to the fullest in spite of the circumstances in which they are dealt. In my opinion, human flourishing requires a great deal of faith, and it allows us to fully experience things like joy, hope, peace, love, trust, and to grow. And those experiences in our life that make us who we are dependent upon faith, that those two things need to interact. Students often ask me this question: how do these two things coexist? A famous scientist, Francis Crick, who was a co-discoverer of DNA, once said, "You, your joys and your sorrows, your memories and ambitions, your sense of personal identity and free will are in fact no more than the behavior of a vast assembly of nerve cells and their associated molecules." In other words, Crick argued that we are nothing more than the interactions of neurons. But how did those neurons form circuitry that formed experiences in our life? How did we first experience the sun rising for the first time? Can we explain that in a way that the neurons communicated? The first time that we dipped our toes into Lake Michigan, the first time we felt love, these are experiences. These are experiences that I would argue depend upon a solid faith background. And the first time that you felt God's presence and all of these things, yeah, that can change the circuitry in your brain. But faith and neuroscience are not things that need to be exclusive. They can work together. The connections that we form depend on the experiences that we accumulate over a lifetime, and those experiences, in my opinion, include our faith. I recently went to my daughter's classroom. She's a first grader, and it's March reading month, and of course I chose the following book, How Does Sleep Come? I don't know how interested they were in learning about sleep, but I really wanted them to learn something about sleep when I was there. And they were captivated, I think, by the following that I read. Jacob's mama tucked the covers all around Jacob just so, and then she told him, sleep comes quietly, like a snowfall that blankets a meadow on a dark, starry night and lays down a soft white canvas for rabbits to leave footprints. And quietly, silently, softly, peacefully, gently, Jacob fell asleep. I explained to the first graders that sleep is dependent upon our brains. And our brains need sleep in order to function optimally, in order to learn in school and to flourish. And one inquisitive first grader asked me, after I showed them what a human brain actually looks like, be careful with this. So here's the human brain, and I showed them this and said, look, when you sleep, you are nourishing this, right? You should cherish your brain. It is something that you should really protect, right? And she raised her hand and sort of in a squeaky voice, this is a first grader, who's clearly thinking about all of these things, and she said, excuse me, can you tell me where the soul is in that brain? If I could only show you where the soul was located. And I honestly wanted to start talking about how faith influences all of your experiences and that God's call is part of your soul. But I had a hard time talking about this with a first grader. But when you think about it, right, what a profound question from a first grader who's clearly thinking about how the brain causes us to be who we are and what we stand for, and a place that stores our memories, and a powerhouse for everything that we do. She didn't ask me, what's that fluid in there? Or where's the cerebellum? Or how do we actually see? These are questions I could have answered. Right? Where is the soul? Great question. Mysterious question. But it's my opinion that God has created us to be unique, loving, understanding, compassionate individuals, ready and willing to do great things. And our brain is part of that, right? And one way for us to listen to the call that God is providing us is to rest. I hope that I've clearly conveyed the importance of sleep to you. I hope that you get the sleep that you need, even if it's just for tonight. Just humor me. But I want you to think about a couple other things, which is that one way to think about the importance of sleep is to consider that sin can degrade our brain's potential to do great things. And loving the people around you, including God, can cause positive epigenetic changes, real changes in your brain that can occur. So having a faithful life can increase your potential to new heights. Your brain is how you become aware of God, connect with God, but it is also how you can become separated from God, and ultimately it is how you reconnect with God. So praying and resting will allow your body to relax, to become more aware of God's presence in your life. Start with a picture of yourself doing something that you love, and do this tonight around bedtime, just shortly before 10 p.m., okay? After you've turned off all of the lights and everything's all serene and ready to go. But I want you to think about the opportunities that are presented to you each day. Think about who you are. Think about your faith and how it impacts the person that you've become. And then get the rest that your body is so desperately craving. I think then you will truly realize your true potential as a person on this planet. And so again, I'm sort of reiterating this fact that you should rest, you should listen to God's call. Some of the research that I'm doing right now in collaboration with Dr. Alyssa Cheadle in psychology does start to touch upon some of these questions of how do sleep and health and religiosity and spirituality all connect. And we're looking at this in college students right now, but I'd like to sort of look at this in adolescents and also in elderly individuals. Believe it or not, we don't already know that much about the interactions between faith and sleep. There's sort of a dearth of literature on this. It's just not very well known. And so we're starting to ask those questions in the daily diary study. And also thinking about, are there ways to reverse these trends of society receiving less and less sleep? We're at a point where it's an epidemic, and we're at a point where if you look at the trends over time, we're getting less and less sleep as a society. over time? When is it going to stop? When is it going to hopefully reverse? One study that we did with some students last year was to look at giving participants, college students, a short 20-minute educational video about how to get better sleep. Putting your phones away is important, and some other tips to get better sleep. And we found that that short 30-minute video did improve students' sleep patterns according to a Fitbit and according to the self-report, at least during the weekdays. On the weekends it all fell apart, but at least during the weekdays it worked. And if I'm honest, we only did this for a week after the video, so how long lasting is that effect? I don't know. But at least for that week, we were able to increase sleep amounts by, about 30 to 40 minutes, somewhere in there. And the amount of screen time was significantly reduced in the subjects that watched the sleep video. So they apparently learned something, but again, we don't know anything about whether that was long-term. My research background is really focused on understanding sleep and how it's important for health. But as you saw, there's some flavors in there about development, and I'm really interested in all of those things and how our experiences affect the quality and quantity of sleep we get each night. Since the neural connections form at a young age, it's an important age to study sleep in young adulthood. I want to kind of end by expressing this idea that parents and the experiences that children get are so important for setting the stage for children, even to get the sleep that they need. There are studies out there, longitudinal studies, that show that children that get better sleep actually get better sleep as they age, and will have better health outcomes. Parents are also instrumental in teaching their children about God and giving them a diverse set of experiences that will allow their children to truly flourish. And so it's true for everyone that we all need to rest. We all need to listen to God's call, to reflect upon the experiences that have led us to the person who we've become, and to trust in Him. In rest, we will have the space to listen. Through prayer, we'll discover our calling, and through all of these things, we'll flourish. So I want to thank you for listening today. I really appreciate you coming today. So thanks.
Nice picture.
Oh, yeah.
We have time for just a few questions for Dr. Gall. Lots to think about here with sleep.
You talked a little bit about Fitbits, and I'm wondering at the value of the way that they calculate sleep, and then trying to base my own health and expectations on those.
Right, so the Fitbits have, they have positives and negatives, and some of the positives about the Fitbits are that they allow us to at least get a better idea of sleep beyond self-report. And there is quite a bit of evidence out there that they're pretty accurate. We've run some correlations actually between some self-report data in college students between how much they said they slept and how much the Fitbit reports they sleep. There's a very strong positive correlation between those things. So it's kind of, in a way, it's better than self-report, at least in my opinion. It's another measure beyond just self-report, and I think in having another measure, it certainly doesn't hurt for us to be able to look at sleep patterns. So does that answer your question? Yeah. Okay.
This is a completely naive question. What's the Fitbit actually measuring?
Fitbit is measuring activity, and when activity ceases and the organism, the human, becomes less active, it actually will count that as sleep. So it will measure sleep bouts, it will measure total amount of sleep, it will measure any time the organism gets up and walks around. So activity and sleep, those are a couple major things that it actually measures. And it at least gives us an extra bit of information to look at.
Can you tell us what happens to our brains when we don't get enough sleep?
Ooh, yeah. All sorts of things. Sleep deprivation is a major problem in society, and it's a major problem for health. It definitely has cognitive issues. You might have noticed that there are cognitive impairments that occur if you don't get enough sleep. But it can increase cortisol levels. It can make you feel more stressed. It can result in these things called free radicals and things that are not necessarily good for your health. We know that it's sleep is so important because when individuals don't get enough sleep, their health literally declines. And we can find measures of the immune system working in overdrive trying to compensate for the lack of sleep individuals are getting. So it's a major problem. I hear students tell me all the time, well, I'm fine, I can function on 2 to 3 hours of sleep, trust me. Well, I don't believe them, first of all, but really what happens is we get used to the shorter amount of sleep that we get, and it would really amazingly transform their lives if they got more sleep and they could see that their cognition improves and that their health may even improve and all of these things. So pretty much most aspects of your life can be significantly impaired if you don't get enough sleep. It's kind of a short topic.
Do you have an opinion on things people take to help them fall asleep, like taking Z-Quil or things like that every night?
That's where I thought that was going. So melatonin is something that's produced naturally within your own body. It naturally increases at night when it's dark. It becomes suppressed when we are in even artificial lighting situations. So if you're asking whether or not you can improve your sleep by taking melatonin, the answer is perhaps in the short term, but unless you're taking the melatonin in the proper dose at the exact proper time when your melatonin is normally rising, if you're doing that, it might help. But we also have to realize that melatonin is something that you're exogenously producing, that your body is supposed to be naturally producing, and when you take an exogenous substance, that means that your body will likely produce less of it. And so when you stop taking the melatonin, now your brain, your body is all messed up, and it has to start producing the melatonin again. So, you know, it's my opinion that the best way to get better sleep is to try to organize your life so that you do all the things that you need to do during the day, get as much sunlight as you can during the day, and when it's nighttime, keep the lights off and go to bed at 9 or 10 p.m. Because drugs just honestly are not the answer, in my opinion. If you got a medical doctor here, you might say something different, we could duke it out, but that is my opinion. You want to try to change things behaviorally before you do with something exogenous, drug usage like that.
Time for one more. Oh, good, I get to ask. Oh, wait, please, there, please, yeah.
What's the liquid around the brain?
Oh my goodness. All right, so do you know this story? Do you know what I'm going to say here?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So what's in there is formaldehyde, because it's a fixative, it keeps it preserved. And on my way over here, one of the brains that I had dropped out of the bag and literally splatted right in front of my office door. So as you go back to your office today, there may be a hazmat crew, I'm not sure. But yeah, it's a chemical and not the safest one, and I've never done that before, which caused my stress levels to go way up here, and sort of calm things back down. But yeah, it's formaldehyde. Yeah.
Dr. Gall, thank you for pulling back the curtain on the magic of today's presentation. But I want to thank you too for a wonderful presentation. Neuroscience is such a new field, it's a developing field. We're so privileged, I think, to have you and others here working on this and working on something that does have real implications for faith. If I had time, I'd ask you about 3 questions about your work with Professor Cheadle. Excited about it. But join me again, thanking Dr. Gall one more time.